You have all heard the expression, you are what you eat, right? And of course, in my class, I completely take that apart, but, but it is a good starting point. In eating particular foods, we can imagine becoming energized, feeling comforted, fighting off a cold, reminded of childhood. It's really well documented that smells and tastes of familiar foods can trigger a fleeting yet deeply intense and very real connection to faraway peoples and places. The philosopher Marcel Proust wrote about this in a very, very, very long book that many people have never read, but they've heard of the Madeleine, Proust's Madeleine. And to illustrate this association between taste and the rush of memories of childhood or of home or of a place, I always show the clip from the end of Ratatouille to my students, right? That is a Proustian moment. And we've all probably experienced them to varying degrees, but it does help us understand why diasporic and immigrant communities are often anchored by restaurants or food import stores. The sensory power of food to enact or to evoke larger social wholes, a sense of home, helps us understand, too, why sometimes people will say they haven't eaten, even if they've just put a lot of food in their bodies, if that didn't include a bowl of rice or fufu or some other, often very starchy, but culinary staple that to them signals a proper meal, a real meal. Meanwhile, of course, categories of identity reinforce categories of edibility, of what is and is not fit to eat, reinforce social categories that differentiate groups of people. We eat this, but they eat that. You can think of pork, shellfish, a cheeseburger, eating dog, right? Dietary laws and cuisines often distinguish religious and national bodies. So foods then encode a range of cultural meanings. Even a food like Soylent. You guys know Soylent? Our students do. So Soylent is this food substitution. The engineered nutritional components said to be what our bodies need, distilled into a formula that's manufactured to be as neutral as possible taste-wise. I did a tasting in my class this semester, and everybody agreed it tasted like the milk left over from eating breakfast cereal, Cheerios milk. So it's actually marketed as anti-food, as simply nutrients, and yet it doesn't escape the symbolic meanings that, as I said, any food will convey. So what is eating Soylent or relying on Soylent for much of one's nutrition, what might that say about an eater, about a person who does that? Well, it could signal a profound commitment to a work ethic, right? Or perhaps could be a way of masking social isolation. So indeed, it's not just what people eat that's culturally meaningful, but how, when, where, with whom. Beyond food's symbolic capacity, food is also a medium of communication and of social power. The daily work of feeding, shopping, cooking, cleaning, serving, presents opportunities for the exercise and of social virtue, to get moral credit, or virtue points, as I like to say. So think about how being a good cook can be taken as an indication of being a good wife and mother. I actually once had Phyllis Schlafly tell me I was going to be a good wife because I served her an apple cake that she really liked. It's a really long story, I can tell you later. Anyway, in proportioning and serving food, in feeding others, people demonstrate love and care that's very genuine, which is one reason why often women might not be willing to relinquish their power in the kitchen, even if it does mean, the double day, and, who doesn't want to be able to complain about all the work they do for other people and what maybe they should earn or be deserving of in return. But through feeding, people also can show favoritism or perhaps displeasure. Withholding food is not uncommon as a punishment. People do that to themselves as well as to others. The anthropologist Arjun Appadurai introduced the notion of gastropolitics to call attention to how people use food to exert power and influence over others, as well as to express social conflict and utter unspoken cultural critique. There are countless anecdotes in the anthropological literature of women burning the onions, or burning the beans, or burning the rice, or burning the eggs to serve to their husbands to show their displeasure with his behavior. So it's a medium of communication. Eating is not the only thing that's cultural about food. As Susie mentioned, I did spend several years studying the people who make artisan cheese in the United States. I'm not going to tell you very much about it, except to say that that research emerged initially out of my own curiosity as somebody who eats a lot of cheese, as a consumer. And about, 15 years ago or so, I was living in New York and became aware of more and more European-style cheeses, so cheeses that were produced to be eaten on their own as part of a cheese plate, maybe with a glass of wine, but not thrown into a casserole or sliced to put between slices of bread, of pre-sliced sandwich bread, right, and sent to school in a kid's lunchbox. Cheeses that were nonetheless made domestically. And those cheeses didn't exist when I was growing up in the 70s, right? So it started for me as a curiosity, where did these foods come from? How did people learn to make this cheese? And in particular, what possessed people to devote their livelihoods and often their life savings to making food for commercial sale using obsolete technologies and backbreaking methods that could have been avoided with automated technologies? And the answer, of course, is that it means something to make food that others are going to share and savor and talk about and enjoy. And also, actually, there's a lot of goat ladies for whom making the cheese enabled the goats to pay for their keep. And it was really about the goats and not about the cheese. There are actually a lot of stories. But my point, though, is that making food, preparing food, sharing food, seeing others enjoy and respond to what you've created with your hands is also culturally meaningful. So I just want to talk a little bit about college students and food. 20 years ago, Carol Cunahan wrote a really interesting paper that I still teach in my classes, in which she articulates what she sees as the food rules that govern or guide the eating cultures, the eating habits of college students. She drew on many years of food journals that she had her students keep at Millersville University, and I believe another university that I can't recall right now. But her findings are, and I think this it may take slightly different forms today, but in principle, I think it still speaks to what we see today. She identified two guiding principles, primary principles that help to organize students' eating habits. The first is that students work, think about, and try to maximize eating good foods and minimize eating bad foods. So this category, this binary distinction between foods that are good and foods that are bad has a lot of power. They all feel like they should eat good foods and should avoid bad foods, but of course what counts as a good food and a bad food is not self-evident and is a moving target. So for example, a good food in the journals, in the self-reporting of the students, good food could mean, of course, nutritionally potent or a nutritionally balanced meal, or it could simply mean food that's eaten at an appropriate meal time during the day, as opposed to food that's consumed in continuous snacking, right? Just as an example. Bad foods tended to be foods that were merely indulgent and neither nutritious nor socially appropriate in other ways. So from this, Cunahan discerned her first rule. Number one, a good person is one who eats well. In other words, with self-awareness and control, right? Eating well not only leads to being well in this rule, but to being good, being a good person. Rule number 1. Rule number 2, the right of choice is an important value, meaning that students should be able to eat what they want. So obviously you can see that these 2 rules often pull in opposite directions. And so the upshot is a lot of trade-offs and bargains, right? So bad food might be okay to eat if it is framed as a reward for good behavior, for studying hard, for working hard, for maybe even for eating, good food earlier in the day. None of this should sound very foreign. So Cunahan points out further, though, that this indicates that there are rules for breaking rules, right? She also discerned that there were sort of public eating and private eating, which is also a way that students can navigate, the inconsistencies in the values that are driving their food choices and habits. So this kind of inconsistency in how people eat reflects what I said earlier, that food and eating encode a variety of values, a variety of meanings simultaneously. So convenience is a value we hear a lot and from our students about what they seek out in food. But convenience isn't often found alongside or within healthy foods, right? Or other virtues associated with food. Eating convenience foods then can represent a compromise. Students may perceive good food or real food as a deferred reward, as something maybe that they'll get to when they have a real life. Not that they are proud of it now, but it's not only maybe is it easy to do now, but maybe they don't even deserve it yet. It's a hypothesis. On this view, a regular diet of top ramen may look more like self-discipline and control, rule number 1 of Cunahan's, rather than a lack of taste or a lack of care about what they eat. Do MIT students care about good food? Nutritious food, tasty food, sustainable food? Well, it's possible, again, that many of our students settle for rather than prefer or embrace other values in the foods that they eat, for the most part, convenient, cheap, etc. Might taking time out for a real meal, a proper meal, seem weak or un-MIT in any ways? Where could they possibly get that idea? Might students at times feel undeserving of good food because they haven't earned it yet in terms of the good behavior that can be rewarded? How might we contraindicate, how might we shift some of those meanings around food? That's my food for thought for you. Thank you.
Since we have Heather for a few minutes, I don't know if anyone wants to ask any questions. I know Heather actually had some students do ethnographies this spring. I don't know. Oh, they haven't handed it in yet. Does anyone have any quick questions before we move on? Sure.
I'm interested if you have any suggestions for community building around food.
Yeah.
At MIT.
Yeah. Well, this is what the working group on peoples and places that I've been part of has been talking about a lot. And I hope that you guys will continue that conversation this afternoon. I do think having spaces that are inviting and that call out for people to use them, which we really don't have much on this campus. Every time I give a talk at another campus and do a guest lecture, I'm just always struck by how normal it is. And how, when's the last time you walked across campus and saw people sitting around eating together? Outside of something like this, which is a working lunch, right? So, sorry? Yeah, but yeah, at the Sloan cafeteria, but that's not undergrads, right? And it is really on the edge of campus too. Undergrads don't actually see that. I mean, you're right, there are some like real people in the Sloan land. I'm being facetious, but I do think that providing spaces that get used by some then will become used by more.
So can I just make an observation?
Yeah, please.
What you have said is absolutely true because where I work, there's really no space for us to have lunch.
Right.
I mean, there is a couple of tables, but it's in a little room. And personally, I don't like to have people hovering over when I'm eating. Like that's like my
Yeah.
treatment all the time. So there are so many of us in our office that literally just eat at our desk.
Yeah, how many of you guys eat most of your lunches at your desks? I know I do. So it really is, it's all the way up and down, right? We don't model having lunch as a thing that you do.
So, and I have made an observation of like places where there are labs and you cannot eat in the lab.
Right.
They do a great job of having the whole lab come down, like the Whitehead. It's a great place where everybody in the lab comes down, they sit down and they eat. But I've seen that in certain administrative areas, it's just not the thing. So like maybe,
Yep. Noted. Yeah.
Great talk. I'm curious, how often is it an issue for the undergraduate students where they're settling for certain foods because they don't have access to either equipment or space or knowledge of how to prepare like cheap, nutritious meals?
Yeah. Well, I'm actually cribbing this a little bit from the MIT food security and insecurity working group report and recommendation. I definitely think that there could be more sort of, we used to call it consumer's ed, right? More sort of guidance about how and where to shop for food, how to cook, how to prepare it. There are quite, I mean, I think it's, half of the undergrads have immediate access to kitchens, right? Live in independent living groups or in dorms that are self-catered. So if you don't live in one of those places, you have friends who do, right? So I think compared to many campuses, there's a much more access to equipment, refrigerators, ovens, things like that. But to what extent there's cooking knowledge and cooking skills, I think is very uneven. Yeah, I think that's good. And even things about shopping and so forth. It's important. Okay, thanks. Now I'm gonna go meet some students.